Have you ever noticed a point in history where there seemed like there was no hope in a situation? For Benjamin Ewell, it almost seemed that way. You see, Benjamin Ewell was a president of William and Mary University in Virginia many years ago. And at that point in time, what happened was a civil war broke out once. And when the Civil War broke out, it hurt the community very badly. You see, the banks went bankrupt. There was no money left for the banks. And because the banks went bankrupt, the schools also went bankrupt. There were no more funds to have the school continuing, to have the school running. So what would this do to the community? With no money to run the schools, there was no money to pay the teachers. With no teachers, there would also be no students. This brought great devastation to the community because at this point, the school ceased to exist. It ceased to have life. It seemed as though there was no hope left in the school. So what happened? Benjamin Ewell wasn't like the ordinary people in the community. See, he was a man that envisioned hope. While the whole community gave up on the situation, gave up on the school, Benjamin Ewell was the one man who never gave up. He chose to go to the school every morning for 7 whole years, and he rang those school bells every single morning to announce to the community school was in session. After a while, eventually the community caught on to his vision as well. You see, they started to believe that the school can be revived. There can be classes going on. Just because there was a crisis doesn't mean it's the end. William and Mary is the second oldest university in all of America, and it's the oldest one that is still active today. A wise man by the name of Henry Kissinger said this once: "The task of a leader is to take you from where you are to where you have not been yet." I believe many of us today are at places in our lives where we experience like there's no hope left in us. There's nothing we can look forward to. Well, I'm here today to tell you there is hope. There is something more for your future. There's a man in the Bible that talks about many different types of hope. His name is Ezekiel. You see, Ezekiel was a man of God who got visions. He was a prophet. Through these visions, God related messages of hope to give to his people. Today, if you feel as though there's an instance in your life where you seem there's no hope left, I want you to join me as we read the Bible, and maybe it could change your mentality. Maybe after today, you might feel a little bit more of hope in your life too. Today we're going to begin studying the Bible in Ezekiel chapter 37 and read one of the visions that God gave to Ezekiel. "The hand of the Lord was upon me, and he brought me out in the spirit of the Lord, and set me in the middle of a valley. It was full of bones. He led me back and forth among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. He asked me, 'Son of man, can these bones live?' I said, 'O sovereign Lord, you alone know.' Then he said to me, 'Prophesy to these bones, and say to them, dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons to you, and make flesh come upon you, and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am the Lord.' So I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I prophesied, there was a noise, a rattling sound, and the bones came together, bone to bone. I looked, and tendons and flesh appeared on them, and skin covered them, but there was no breath in them. Then he said to me, 'Prophesy to the breath, prophesy, Son of man, and say to it, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Come from the 4 winds, O breath, and breathe into these slain, and breathe the breath enter them.' So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath entered them. They came to life and stood up to their feet, a vast army. Have you ever imagined this, what it might look like? You see, for us, in the world we live today, it's not that difficult to get a glimpse of what it might have looked like. Dry bones all around, dead corpses all over, seeming like there's no hope in the valley. I want to take you to a little moment in history. Not too long ago, a time in history where there was the Nazis and the Jews. There was moments in history where people were getting destroyed, people were getting killed by gas chambers, by many different methods of destruction, all because one person didn't like the other. See, I want you to imagine the Jews at that moment in history. Imagine them in the concentration camps, how they might have felt while they were seeing family members being killed, brothers, sisters beaten to death. It might have looked like a time of no hope. And when we look at it with our own human perspective and ask the question that the Bible says, can these bones live? Certainly not. There's no way, no chance of survival for these people. But the story goes on. And it relates a beautiful message. And that message is when we see that there's no hope in us, we can't do nothing about it. We have to throw it back to God. Because God is the one that will take care of our problems. God is the one that can resolve anything that we're going through. And here's what the people did. Here's what Ezekiel did. See, Ezekiel knew that in that valley of dry bones, there was nothing he can do about it. There was nothing he can do to bring those bones back to life. So in his own wisdom, he brought it back to God and said, God, only you know. Only you can make something happen out of this. In the world we live today, hope has become a fantasy. You see, we're taught to be practical. The things I can see, the things my mind can comprehend, that I will go after. That is what I know I can achieve. And that's how we live. We choose not to believe in hope, but to believe in things that are practical. But how do the people of the Bible react? See, because the Bible teaches us that those who hoped the greatest were rewarded the greatest. For instance, try to picture all of those sick people at Jesus' feet. Those that never walked in their whole life, had leprosy, couldn't see. All these people were full of diseases that were for many, many years. It seemed like there was no hope for them. They lived their life and that's all they knew. This disease. But they believed in Jesus. They had hope in Jesus. They had more hope than anyone else. And because they had so much hope that they approached Jesus, they were rewarded with healing. That's what the Bible teaches. Those who are hope the most are rewarded the most. But it doesn't just go there. You see, if we go further down the line, we can come to a point in Martin Luther, a man who saw what the Catholic Church was doing to the community, a man who knew that the principles the Catholic Church was teaching were contrary to the Bible, a man who believed in something more, saw a difference, and he decided to make a difference, to change what was wrong, a man who had hope for something better that was being taught. Going even closer to us, we see a man called Martin Luther King Jr. Many of us know this man as the one man in history who had a dream to bring white people and black people together again, a dream where people wouldn't be racist towards one another, people wouldn't condemn one another, wouldn't criticize one another just because of their color. See, in the world we live, this world needs people like that. People who have a dream, people who see hope, who envision something more than the situation they're in. They see the spot they're standing in right now, and it seems like as though there's no hope. It seems there's no life in whatever they're going through right now. But just because there's no life in what they're going through now doesn't mean things won't change in the future. James chapter 4 verse 7 says this: "Submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. Come near to God and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded." In your life, the only place solutions can be found is in hope. For instance, let me explain. Hope is built on dreamers. Dreamers is built on people with a vision of a future. That is what you must do in your life in order to succeed. You see, we must believe that there's a power greater than our current problem. That there is something that can change what we're going through. Or there's someone that can make a difference. We know, as the Bible teaches, that there is this one man. His name is God. See, God has the power to change things. The Bible tells us that with God, all things are possible. What is your valley today? For many of us, we tend to have to face problems that we don't know how to deal with. For most of us, as Christians, we have to deal with sin. Sin that we brought upon ourselves. Sin that the devil tempts us to do. You see, sin takes a person further than they ever planned to go, costs them more than they ever planned to pay, and keeps a person there longer than they ever meant to stay. You see, sin brings no life to you. Sin robs us of our lives. And a life without Christ is a life without hope, a life without future, a life without any promises, a life that's dead. So what are we supposed to do in our lives today to make a difference, to change anything? Well, we have to act or speak as Ezekiel did in the Bible. You see, when Ezekiel was asked, "Can these bones live?"